All right. Well, I'm sorry y'all missed that at home. They're all weeping. They want to go home now. Anyways, important question. When's break time? I'm sure I'm supposed to take a break, right?
Up to you, but normally we take a break after about an hour and 10 or so.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Okay, I'll keep that in mind. We go till 6:30, right? Or I mean 8:30. Excuse me. Yeah, 6:30. I'm winded. All right. So, with that being said, let's get started. We got plenty of material to cover. Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. I taught it a few times at the School of Preaching, but as Dave mentioned, we went out to California in 2017, so I had to resign from the Florida School of Preaching. Couldn't drive 3,000 miles once a week to teach a class, so I had to give it up. So Dave, I was hoping to meet Eddie tonight. How's Eddie doing?
He's online. He's doing good.
Glad to hear it, Eddie. Was hoping to see you tonight. Anyways, last semester, Eddie having his health problems, I stepped in, so I've been getting up to speed. It's amazing how quickly it can go away when you're not demanded to teach it all the time. So I've been jumping back in, and I think we're good to go. In our study of the book of Leviticus, seems to me, the first thing that I notice is that we're starting in book 3 of a 5-book series, Law of Moses. If I ever go to a movie and you get there 10 minutes late and you're determined to stick it out, and yet 45 minutes into it, you realize, I'll bet I missed something important in those first 10 minutes because I still don't know who Charlie is, and he seems to be the star of the show. What did he do again? What did I miss? But anyways, by the way, I think that has profound implications with one of our most important messages in the Church of Christ. We must worship God in spirit and in truth. What do you think worship is to most people? I'll tell you what it is. It's whatever's going on when they walk through the door. They don't know any better. Now, I mean, obviously, if there were some extremely bizarre things going on, but just generally speaking, the average person that decides one day they're going to start making church attendance a regular part of their life, what do they think worship is? Pretty much going to describe whatever it is they experienced when they go there. It never dawns on anybody to think to themselves, oh, wait a minute. On the day of Pentecost, when the apostles were guided into all truth by the Holy Spirit, what were they doing when they gathered up on Sunday to worship? Seems to me that's where we ought to start looking for our definition of how to worship God. And it seems to me one of the problems with the world that we live in is that that really hasn't dawned on people. But anyways, I think we need to go back to the basics. Imagine a world where there is no worship. What would you do? Well, I think we would stop and try to find out what the apostles were doing. The man that converted me said it, and I thought that was pretty simple. He said, Mike, if the apostles were guided into all truth by the Holy Spirit, if we just do what they did, wouldn't you think that put you on pretty safe ground? And I thought that was true. Well, same principle applies here in the Law of Moses. We're picking it up in Leviticus. Probably some things we should have learned or at least remembered about Genesis and Exodus. So as we think about getting ready to study the book of Leviticus, go back to Genesis chapter 12. Genesis 12. Genesis 1 through 11, of course, is the chapters that most people ponder over and over and over again. You can spend a lifetime studying Genesis 1 through 11. There's so much to ponder. But for the Christian, Genesis 12 is a pretty good place to start. But the book of Genesis, origins, origin of man, or excuse me, the origin of the universe, chapter 1, heavens and the earth. Chapter 2, origin of course, Adam and Eve been created, but chapter 2, the origin of marriage. Chapter 3, the origin of sin. And by the way, if you think that stuff's just easy, I didn't know any of the Bible. I was a Christian for, what was it, March till August, that's 5 months. I was Christian for 5 months before I was in school of preaching. And we never went to church when I was a kid, never went to worship anywhere. So I didn't know anything. First time I'm reading Genesis 3, what do you think jumps out at me?
Sin.
Talking snake. That's all I saw. Really realized what was going on. But what's really going on there? Set aside some of the profound questions that people get into. What's Genesis 3 there for? The origin of sin. Genesis 4, the origin of worship. How do you properly approach God, which is kind of a pretty good place for us to start. And everybody knows the story about Cain and Abel. By the way, another thing that occurred to me the first time I read Genesis. Cain and Abel, when you read that story in Genesis chapter 4, it's pretty obvious that God accepted Abel's offer. What did he offer? Flock, yeah, blood sacrifice. Pretty obvious. Cain offered the fruit of the ground. That's what he worked with. That's what he offered. What's not obvious is, why was God bothered by it? It's obvious he was, but why was it? And it's amazing that how many scholars I've read that I don't think can really pin it down as well as they should. Two things I want you to remember about the law of Moses, and of course I'm talking about Genesis right now, but two things I want you to remember about it. Number one, who's the first audience? First audience. Get your copy of Genesis, hot off the presses. Ooh, I can still burn in my hand. Huh? Israelites in the wilderness. 400 years of slavery. Any rabbis running around among those people?
Nope.
Common man. How did he understand it? I think that's pretty important. Another thing I think is important too is for most of us, this isn't the first time we're reading this material. We've learned a lot about God along the way to the book of Revelation. Well, I think it's quite appropriate and okay to remember some of the things we've learned about God along the way and apply them to other situations. Cain and Abel. Let me give you 4 New Testament passages before we get into Genesis 12. But let me give you 4 New Testament passages. First of all, anybody know Romans 6:23? You do, you just may not know it's Romans 6:23. What? Wages of sin is death. What is it that separates man from God? And the wages of sin is death. Anybody know Hebrews 11:4? I'll get you started. By faith, Abel. Okay, so his sacrifice was by faith. Even Smith in his book dances all around it, but he doesn't pin it down the way I wish he would. If I were, talking to the man, I would say, I think you can really pin it down a little bit better than that. And here's what I mean by that. How does one acquire faith? Any New Testament passages? Oh, say maybe the book of Romans, Curtis? Faith comes by hearing. Hearing by the word of God. Hebrews 9:22. Without the shedding of blood, there is no remission. Now, we've learned those things, and I realize they're all New Testament passages, but they teach us something about God. And as I go back into the story of Cain and Abel, Hebrew writer told me he offered it by faith. Paul told me in Romans 10:17, faith comes by hearing. Hebrew writer once again told me that without the shedding of blood, there is no remission of sins. What's the purpose of sacrifice? It's to have remission of sins, to get in a right relationship with God. Fruit of the ground won't do it. And of course, the wages of sin is death. And my point being that even when you read Genesis chapter 4 and you don't see an actual command of what he wanted, I think we can reasonably assume, based on what passages I just quoted you, that God told them both what he wanted. I cannot tell you why Cain did not want to give it to him, but I can tell you that he knew what God wanted. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. Hebrews 11:6. Abel offered a more excellent sacrifice because he offered it by faith, which comes by hearing. But anyways, the origin of worship, and something Jackie said. Jackie said a lot of things I never forgot, and here's another one of them. Very frustrating with the world that we live in, that we can't see eye to eye religiously. And Jackie said, do you realize when there was only one family on the face of the earth, one brother killed the other one in the name of religion? I mean, that disagreement goes back a long ways. That's part of human nature there. Cain didn't like his brother very much for being accepted when he wasn't. But the origin of sin, or excuse me, the origin of worship, Genesis chapter 4. Of course, we get into the genealogies of Cain and then the genealogies of Seth, who replaced Abel. Next thing you know, we got a flood. After the flood, Noah, and of course, who's the only survivors of the flood?
Noah's what? Yeah. 3 sons of their wives.
Yeah, you get it. Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And Noah and their 4 wives. Do you believe that story? I do. Yeah, I do. I believe all of Genesis 1 through 11, by the way. And I don't have any problem defending it whenever I have to. But if I believe Genesis chapters 1 through 11 and that the entire earth was populated by one family, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, you know what that means? We're all brothers and sisters in Christ. I'm not sure who came up with racism, but it's pretty foolish if you ask me. We're all brothers. And if you can't see that, I feel sorry and wish you could. But anyways, after Noah gets off of the ark, and we'll be back to look at him in a minute, we have another genealogy. By the way, did you notice the genealogies before the flood are all about 900 years? I think the average age was 912 years before the flood. Suddenly the flood. Next thing you know, everybody's only living half that long. That flood was a worldwide changing event, folks. Something changed. Human lifespans cut in half. But anyways, we get into the genealogies of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, leading up to a son of Shem, which of course is Abram, Father Abraham. Well, his call starts in Genesis chapter 12. And this, to me, as far as the scheme of redemption, how a person should be saved, it needs to start in the book of Genesis, particularly right here with the call of Abraham. By the way, have you ever noticed, you ask somebody just, quick while they're not thinking about, hey, who's Abraham? You ever notice everybody knows the name of Abraham? You ask somebody point blank, who is Abraham? And you'd be surprised how many people he's a guy in the Old Testament. Yeah? Can you do better? He's the father of the Jewish people. That's a pretty important role. Father Abraham. What did Jesus say about him? Luke chapter 16. To die is to be comforted in the bosom of Abraham. Well, it all starts right here with Abraham. Now, he's called Abram right here. His name won't change till chapter 17. But verse 1, now the Lord had said to Abram, get out of your country, from your kindred, from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. And by the way, he's a very wealthy man, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Why do people move? Well, one of the reasons people move is because life where they're at isn't going so well. Could you say that about Abraham? No. He was doing very well in Ur of the Chaldees. Why'd you move, Abraham? God told me. You think that will get people's attention? I will make you a great nation. What nation is that? It's the nation of Israel. Father Abraham, the father of the Jewish people. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great. And by the way, when you're pondering the promises of God, there's one to think of right there. How great is the name of Abraham? Do Muslims honor his name?
Yes.
Do Jews still honor his name?
Yes.
Are we still sitting right here tonight honoring his name? God makes a promise you. He usually exceeds what you think he can do with it. Here we are, 4,000 years later, still honoring the name of Abraham. Make your name great. You shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. And here's your key phrase. And in you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. What's that a reference to? Reference to Christ. In your genes, in your loins, to use a biblical term. In other words, genealogically speaking, Jesus Christ. Of course, David will come first. Jesse will come first, David's father. Isaiah uses Jesse's name in prophecy. But then comes David, and then, of course, comes Christ. Book of Matthew. You ever notice the genealogy traces from Jesus to Abraham? whereas Luke traces from Jesus all the way back to Adam? What's the reason for the difference? Different audience. Matthew is trying to prove to the Jewish audience that Jesus is the Messiah. Sorry you rejected him, but you can repent. But Jesus is the Messiah, the one you've been looking for, son of Abraham. Whereas Luke was trying to prove it to the world. And so Jesus is the Savior of the world, and he takes it all the way back to to Adam. But anyways, that's where it all starts. Abram starts off. But one of the things I want you to notice there is God's talking to Abraham, and he hasn't said a word to him about a child, just about a nation, and he also hasn't mentioned Sarah. Look at chapter 15. Abraham's a little bit older now, and he certainly doesn't know when's God going to fulfill this promise. Anybody remember how old Abraham is? Not in chapter 15, I'm sorry, in chapter 12. 75. It took 25 years to have Isaac. Okay, I think about 10 years have elapsed here. But still, God has promised him a nation. But he hasn't said anything about his own son, which is why in chapter 15 he's questioning God. Is it going to be the Eliezer's son? Will that be my heir? Am I going to bring up Eliezer's son? Because I haven't had any children, and then clock is ticking. And God makes him a promise in this chapter. But look at verse 4. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him again, saying, this one shall not be your heir, that's Eliezer's son, but one who will come from your own body shall be your heir. Now, why is that significant? Because now he knows, okay, I'm going to produce this child, but he doesn't know it's Sarah. And Sarah doesn't know it's Sarah, which is why chapter 16 is going to be such a disaster. But drop down to verse 13, because this fits in with our offerings in the book of Leviticus. Chapter 13, God reaffirms the promise. Then he said to Abram, know certainly that your descendants, verse 13, will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them and afflict them for 400 years. What's that an obvious reference to? The bondage of Egypt. And also the nation whom they serve I will judge. And afterwards they shall come out with great possessions. That phrase, I will judge, jumps out at me. Why is that? Because the Egyptians are subject to God too. Just because they don't submit themselves to God doesn't mean they aren't submit. Why? What's the importance of the genealogy of Shem, Ham, and Japheth? It's to show you that eyewitnesses of the flood populated Egypt. Well, where'd they come up with all these gods then? One generation not teaching another generation. What do you end up with? You end up with a ray god that goes across the sky. And I think it's got a head of a falcon. He's riding on a beam, on an orb. That was the Egyptian god, Re, the sun god. Well, why is there 3 days of darkness? Because there is no sun god. I'm going to judge these people. And he started judging them in the book of Exodus. We'll get to that in a minute. Verse 15, now as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried at a good old age, but in the fourth generation they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. The Amorites, where they come from? Obviously, they came from same place all men came from, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So why do they worship the way they do? Almost seems like God thinks it's time for the Amorites to leave Canaan. Now I'm going to replace them with the Israelites. My point being that God, even in the days of Abraham, is making it clear that he is the God of all earth. But anyways, keep reading. Verse 17. And it came to pass when the sun went down and it was dark, that behold, there was a smoking oven and a burning torch that passed between those pieces. On the same day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, to your descendants, I have given this land from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates. We can stop right there. What I wanted you to read was, notice how the Lord moved between the pieces. I didn't read the part where Abraham sacrificed the animal and then split it up. I should have. But after he did that and he laid the pieces out, notice how God walked between them. It was an ancient custom. It was a solemn oath that ancient man hung on to. When they were making a solemn oath, they would split open an animal and walk between it. That signified the solemnity of it. Well, here we see God doing the same thing. Well, I think there's some symbolism with the offerings in the book of Leviticus. Yeah, David.
It's fascinating that Abram did not walk through with God. The symbology is that one that walked through assumed the curse if they did not fulfill the covenant.
Oh, thank you. Took it even a step further. I did not know that. Appreciate that. Everybody hear that? Yeah. Serious oath, of course, is what we're talking about. God's making a serious covenant with Abraham. He's coming from your body. Now, of course, we know chapter 16, Sarah ends up giving Abraham Hagar, and that's where Ishmael came from. We won't worry about that. But in the interest of time, let's get back on track as far as the promise. Now, remember, there's two occasions that God made a promise to Abraham. Look at chapter 28. Genesis 28. Drop down to verse 13. And behold, the Lord stood above it. And by the way, I should have said, this is the ladder. Jacob has the dream where the ladder with angels ascending up and down on it. Well, look what God says to Jacob. Verse 13, and behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham, your father, and God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and your descendants. Also, your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. You shall spread abroad to the west and to the east, to the north and the south. And in you and in your seed, there's that same language, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. I actually skipped over Isaac's, but in the interest of time, we'll keep moving. But God made a promise to Isaac as well. And then Isaac, of course, who's his two sons? Jacob and Esau. Jacob should have had the blessings because he was the older one, but Jacob came out, even in the womb, came out clutching his brother's heel, which was a prophecy that he would rule over him, even though it should have by rights. One of the tragedies sometimes I think of is every time I think of the phrase, the kingdom of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, it should read the kingdom of Abraham, Isaac, and Esau. If Esau had a spiritual mind, but of course he didn't. And so it's the kingdom of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God's made a promise to Abraham, makes the same promise to Isaac, and he makes the promise to Jacob right here. Look at chapter 29. Now, most of us probably know the story. Jacob, who's he in love with? He's in love with Rachel. Labor 7 years for her, only to wake up on his wedding morning and find out what? I've been tricked, bamboozled. Labors another 7 years to marry Rachel, and he finally does. But now Rachel's barren. Now, by the way, I think this is a great place to start. There's a profound question people ask that if it was always God's intention that one man be married to one woman for life, that was always God's intention. Why did he bless Jacob, David, and Solomon? They had multiple wives. My answer to that is a short answer. I'd give you the long answer if we weren't in the middle of all of this, but here's the short answer. You ever read the life of Jacob, David, and Solomon? You know what I learned after I get done reading their lives? One wife's all you need. And I really believe that's what we're supposed to learn. I don't think you want to go anywhere near multiple marriages. Jacob is married to two women. You think Leah knows she's not loved? Yeah. Look at the names of the children she has. God decided, just like Sarah and Rebecca, by the way. Rebecca didn't have a child for 20 years. Sarah waited 25. Rebecca waited 20. And here's Rachel, and she's barren as well. But God allows Leah to prosper. But notice the names of the children. Look at chapter 29, verse 31. When the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. So Leah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Reuben. For she said, the Lord has surely looked on my affliction. Now therefore my husband will love me. That's kind of a pathetic reason to name your child Reuben. But you see the anguish and heartbreak she's in? Verse 33, then she conceived again and bore a son and said, because the Lord has heard that I am unloved, he has therefore given me a son also. And she called his name Simeon, which means hearing. Verse 34, she conceived again and bore a son and said, now this time my husband will become attached to me because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore his name will be called Levi. Why do you think we're reading this chapter right now? What book are we about to study? Leviticus. Levi is the priestly tribe. Who is Levi? He's the 3rd son of Jacob. Not by Rachel, though. 3rd son of Jacob by Leah. And as long as we're right here, let's read the next one. Verse 35, and she conceived again and bore a son and said, now I will praise the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah. Then she stopped bearing. And of course, Judah means praise. Why did I read on down to Judah? I'm sure you scholars know. Jesus is going to come from Judah. The lion from the tribe of Judah. And by the way, and the end of this book is where that imagery comes from. Jesus, or Jacob on his deathbed, likens Judah's son to a lion. But anyways, Jacob has 12 sons. The first 4 were by Leah, and this is what I mean about you don't want to live in a house with 2 women. Because when Rachel sees that she's not having any children, anybody remember what she does for a solution? Here's my handmaid. Have children with her, I'll raise them up as my own. I think he has 2 in a row. Leah's over there, and guess what Leah says? Yeah, I got a handmaid too. There you go, Jacob. And he produces 2 more. It isn't until Joseph, the 11th son, and then Benjamin are Rachel's, which is one of the reasons why Joseph is Jacob's favorite, because the first son produced by Rachel. But anyways, the 3rd son is Levi. And most of you knew that, but I just want to make sure that we read it. Look at chapter 46 in Genesis. Most of us know the story about Jacob being favored. His brothers sell him into slavery. He ends up being thrown in jail where he's interpreting the Pharaoh's dreams, and he saves his not only Egypt, but his own people. His brothers that sold him in slavery have to come to Egypt to beg food from him, Don't even realize it's him. It has been so long. I think it was 13 years. Didn't look like him. But they figure out that it is him. Well, after his father finds out that he's still alive, Joseph invites everyone to move into Egypt, where they are going to live as they ride out the famine. Chapter 46, let's look at verse 26. All the persons who went with Jacob to Egypt, who came from his body besides Jacob's sons' wives, were 66 persons in all. And the sons of Joseph who were born to him in Egypt were 2 persons, who were Joseph's 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. You realize there are actually 13 tribes, right? Well, then why was the land only divided up 12 ways? Levites get cities within the 12 other tribes. Well, how do you get that number? If Jacob had 12 sons, yes. Joseph came and brought his 2 sons to Jacob, and Jacob adopted them, basically. When you look at the book of Joshua, you will see that Joseph doesn't get any territory. His 2 sons do. So Joseph is well represented. But that makes 12 tribes. You start with 12, take off Joseph, that's 11. But add his 2 sons, you're at 13. Same with the apostles. And by the way, why do I think that's significant? Because when you get to the book of Revelation, how many foundations are there? How many gates are there to heaven? Yeah. You got the names of the patriarchs and the names of the apostles. Well, which ones they leave out?
4 elders.
Yeah, 24 elders. Point being, that I believe in the book of Revelation that number is being used very symbolically. Because in reality, we had 13 patriarchs, we had 13 apostles. But still, 7 is a very highly symbolic number. But anyways, so there were 70 souls that went down into Egypt. And then let's just notice how the book ends. Book of Genesis. When Joseph dies, he tells when Jacob dies, he tells Joseph he wants to be buried back in the promised land, which he honors. Now, after he's gone, his brother, or Joseph's brothers, think that now he's going to take revenge on us. And of course, he speaks kindly to them. One of the great verses in the book of Genesis, verse 20. But as for you, Joseph speaking to his brothers, you meant selling me into slavery evil. You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to bring it about as it is this day to save many people alive. Now, therefore, do not be afraid, and I will provide for you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. So Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's household, and Joseph lived 110 years. Joseph saw Ephraim's children to the 3rd generation. Children of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were also brought up on Joseph's knee, and Joseph and his brethren. Joseph said to his brethren, I am dying, but God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land to the land of which he swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Then Joseph took an oath from the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here. So Joseph died being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put into a coffin in Egypt. Turn that one page, and a whole lot has happened. 70 souls in Egypt. Joseph is dead. Turn that first page to the book of Exodus. And by the way, people don't easily get the timeline of the Bible sometimes. And I'll give you for instance. One of my students did an excellent paper on Joseph, the life of Joseph. I read it, and it's like, man, I'll preach that. No one knows that kid wrote it. I don't have to give him credit. No one will hear. I'm just teasing, but it was an impressive paper. Yeah, I think his mother's listening to it. But the point being, he didn't realize at the same time that when you turn to the book of Exodus, how many Israelites we got now? We left off at 70 in the book of Genesis. How many we got now? That's how many fighting men we have. About 3 million people. They have been fruitful and they have multiplied. Look at how the book of Exodus starts. Now these are the names of the children of Israel who came to Egypt. Each man and his household came with him. Jacob, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher. All those who were descendants of Jacob were 70 persons, for Joseph was in Egypt already. And Joseph died and all his brothers and all that generation. But the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly, multiplied and grew exceedingly mighty. And the land was filled with them. And here's key verse. Now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. What's significant about that verse? Don't know your history. Don't know how grateful you should be for the Israelites. All we know is that they are a threat. And we're going to put down that threat. Male children are going to be killed, which is what I find fascinating about the book of Exodus with the average, sometimes Christian, sometimes just what we will say a believer. You know, like I was brought up in a household. That's what I mean. Is if you'd asked anybody at the kitchen table, you believe Jesus Christ is the Son of God, I think everybody would have said yes. But that's about the last time we talked about Jesus. It just wasn't a part of the conversation. But if you'd asked us, and if you asked the average person, tell me everything you know about the book of Exodus. Let me hear it. Well, actually, I think you'd get a lot of things. It would take people a little while, but they'd probably go, let me see. Moses, right? Isn't that where he starts? Yeah. Didn't he get introduced to God at a burning bush or something like that? I think I heard a story about that. Yeah, we're getting that. 10 plagues? Yeah, I heard about that. Might be able to name one or two, but Certainly couldn't name them all, but I don't blame them. I can't either. So just go back and read it when I forget. But anyways, I'm joking. But yeah, they might tell you about the plagues. And of course, as Dave said, most of them know about the Red Sea. Most of them know, no word. God fed them with manna. Yeah. Weird rock producing water or something like that. 10 Commandments. Yeah. That's what the 10 Commandments are. 40 years wandering in the wilderness. They'd probably tell you that. That's about where they would stop. And you know why that strikes me? If that's where you stop, how much have you covered in the book of Exodus? 10 Commandments are given in chapter 20. How many chapters are in the book of Exodus? The average person has no idea what comes after the 10 Commandments. Have no idea. Look at chapter 25. All the things that we just mentioned, of course, and more are in Exodus. As you move towards the 10 Commandments, which are in chapter 20, Book of Deuteronomy has 10 Commandments as well. I will zero you in at the appropriate time on the Sabbath, because that's important. I don't know if you've noticed this, but you will after you're done in my class. When God told the Jews to honor the Sabbath in the book of Exodus, and he turned around and told them again in the book of Deuteronomy to honor the Sabbath, give a different reason in both passages. And we will discuss both are significant. But anyways, chapter 25 in the book of Exodus, most people don't really, it just doesn't, I mean, they might know it's in there, but its significance seems to escape them. But here we are at the foot of Mount Sinai. And by the way, before we get to 25, anybody know what's going on in chapter 24? Chapter 20 is where the 10 Commandments are given. More law, if you will, is given in chapters 21, 2, and 3. Covenant agreement. Look at chapter 24. Look at verse 7. Then he took the book of the covenant and read it in the hearing of all of the people. And they said, all that the Lord has said, we will do and be obedient. Moses took the blood, sprinkled it on the people, and said, behold, the blood of the covenant which the Lord has made with you according to all these words. Sprinkled it on the law, sprinkled it on the people. Why is that significant? Because we just entered a blood covenant with the Lord. But chapter 25, look at the first 9 verses. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, that they bring me an offering from everyone who gives willingly with his heart. You shall take my offering, and this is the offering with which you take from them: gold, silver, and bronze, blue and purple, scarlet, yarn, fine linen thread and goat's hair, ram skins, dyed red, badger skins, cassia wood, oil for the light, spices for the anointing oil, and for the sweet incense, onyx stones, and stones to be set in the ephod and in the breastplate. And I've got verses 8 and 9 highlighted. And let them make me a sanctuary, and I may dwell among them. According to all that I show you, that is the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furnishings. Just so you shall make it. 3 million people in Israel. Coolest thing I did while we were out in California. We got there in February of 2017. By June, we took a load of supplies to New Mexico Children's Home in Portales, New Mexico. It's a 1,200-mile trip, but we go zipping out there in June, and we drop it off. By the way, if you've never looked up the New Mexico Children's Home, Church of Christ operated, it's pretty impressive work. But I only saw it that one time. But on the way back, we're driving through Arizona on our way back to California, and got to stand on the corner in Winslow, Arizona. By the way, if you didn't know it, there's a store across the street that plays Eagles all day long. But we got a picture taken there.
Still flat that forward.
I did not. But I did stand on the corner in Winslow, Arizona. We went to Billy the Kid, supposedly his grave. Went to the Grand Canyon. Seen it before. It was awesome. But we went to Meteor Crater. Anybody ever heard of Meteor Crater? Anybody been to Meteor Crater? If you ever get a chance, I'm not sure I would drive that far out of my way, but it was right on the way. I just looked up and meteor crater that way. We went and saw meteor crater. Of course, the film they show says 20,000 years ago, this meteor hit the Earth. Well, I don't know how long ago it was, but a meteor hit the Earth. I can tell you that. They had those big telescopes up on the top. You didn't have to put a quarter in or anything, but you're looking at, it's really hard to tell just how big this thing is. And the guy tells you, he says, look out there in the middle. It's that white dot out there. Put your telescope on. It was a 6-foot tall cardboard astronaut waving at you. And the point of that was, from where we were standing, you could not tell that's what it was. You had to have a telescope to figure out what that was. But as the guy's describing, he said you could fit 20 football fields on the surface, on the basement floor, whatever you call it. But this is why I'm thinking of it here. He said if it was a football stadium, it would fit 2.5 to 3 million people. And that's the moment when I realized this is what Moses was dealing with. This kind of scale you're talking about here. I had to have a telescope to see who's down there in the valley. And that's the kind of deal that Moses is working with. Tabernacle built in the wilderness, as we will learn when we get to the book of Numbers. God is does things decently and in order. He is systematic. Notice the systematic approach in Genesis chapter 1, and we will notice when we get to Numbers. 3 tribes on this side, 3 tribes on that side, 3 tribes on that side, 3 tribes here. Moses, Levites, blow the trumpets. When you hear the right trumpet, you guys get up and march. You follow them, you follow them, you follow them. Everybody in order. These people knew how to march. God had them organized. There's 3 million people. But we're getting the tabernacle together. And this is what I mean about the world that we live in. They know, a lot about the book of Exodus, but the tabernacle is not something anybody talks about. It should be the central feature of the Christian, because yes, God saves individuals, but he saves us in the church, and we see that principle at play here. Yeah, Dave.
God has a pattern for everything.
Yeah.
He does.
Got a pattern to everything. So this is chapter 25. Notice, and we're not going to read everything, obviously, because we're in Exodus. We're trying to get to Leviticus, but look at chapter 25, verse 10. The heading over that is the Ark of the Covenant. It's time to build the Ark of the Covenant. Everybody knows what the Ark of the Covenant is? Okay. Drop down to verse 23, the table of showbread. Drop down to verse 31, the golden lampstand. You get to chapter 26, here's all the details of the curtains. Boards and sockets, same chapter. Chapter 26, you get to verse 31, and here is the inner veil that separates the holy place and the most holy place. There is also an outer veil. Chapter 27 is the bronze altar. There's 8 verses. Let's read those, because the first 5 offerings in the book of Leviticus are going to be offered on this altar right here. Chapter 27, verse 1. You shall make an altar of acacia wood, 5 cubits long, 5 cubits broad. The altar shall be square, and its height shall be 3 cubits. You shall make its horns on its 4 corners. Its horn shall be of one piece with it, and you shall overlay it with bronze. You shall make its pans to receive its ashes, its shovels, its basins, its forks, its fire pans. You shall make its utensils of bronze. You shall make a grate for it, a network of bronze. And on the network you shall make 4 bronze rings at its 4 corners. You shall put it under the rim of the altar beneath, that the network may be midway up the altar. And you shall make poles for the altar, poles of acacia wood, overlay them with bronze. The pole shall be put into the rings, and the pole shall be on the 2 sides of the altar to bear it. You shall make it hollow with boards, as it was shown you on the mountain. So they shall make it. Sound like Moses got specific instructions on how this thing was supposed to look? Okay, so there's the bronze altar that we're about to use in the book of Leviticus. You go on in the same chapter in Exodus 27, you get the court of the tabernacle. Drop down to verse, I actually don't need to read that, but you have the command for the oil for the lamp in chapter 20. 7, right at the end. Chapter 28 is Aaron and his son's priestly garments, the Urim and Thummim. Highly mysterious. We won't talk about it tonight, just get us off track. The robe of the ephod is the priestly, the holy crown, the priestly coat. This is all in chapter 28. You get to chapter 29, first thing you got to do, once you've dressed up the priests, high priest Aaron and his sons, by the way, who are his 4 sons at this point? Ithamar and Eleazar. 4 is going to become 2 real quick here. Not tonight. They get to live for 1 more week. But by next week, by the way, that's a profound story that we will go over. And there's a couple of things I want you to notice before we leave Exodus. And next week when we get to that chapter. But look at chapter 30. The altar of incense is made. Chapter 30 also contains the ransom money. That's not important tonight. Chapter 30, verse 17, the bronze laver. Keep that in mind. Chapter 30, verse 22, the anointing oil. One verse I want you to read and remember about the anointing oil. Look at chapter 30. Drop down to verse 33. Whoever compounds any like it, or whoever puts any of it on an outsider, shall be cut off from his people. He's just told us how to make the anointing oil. What's he said? Don't make it like, don't use it for anything other than the anointing oil. Look at the incense, chapter 30, verse 34. And the Lord said to Moses, take sweet spices, stacte, I'm not even sure how you pronounce that, onycha, galbanum, and pure frankincense. With these sweet spices, there shall be equal amounts of each. You shall make of these an incense, a compound according to the art of the perfumer, salted, pure, and holy. You shall beat some of very fine and put some of it before the testimony in the tabernacle of meeting, where I will meet with you. It shall be most holy to you. But as for the incense which you shall make, you shall not make any for yourselves according to its composition. It shall be to you holy. It shall be to you holy for the Lord. Whoever makes any like it to smell it shall be cut off from his people. The anointing oil and the incense, they're for God's purposes only. Don't make them for any other reason. By the time we get to Leviticus chapter 10, I want you to remember we read this, because we're going to read it again. By the way, a question I always ask people when we're testing them for the book of Exodus, who's Bezaleel and Aholiab? No one ever knows the answer to that. Guess I should quit asking that, because no one ever knows it. Chapter 31, Bezaleel and Aholiab, God filled with the spirit of understanding, because of what Dave just said a few minutes ago. These men didn't have the natural ability, artistic ability, to do what they needed to do. Now, they weren't the only ones, but those are 2. I think there's 2 that are named. Bezaleel and Aholiab got filled with the wisdom and the spirit of understanding so that they could, in other words, you made a master craftsman in the blink of an eye. Anybody ever work with a master craftsman? I have. It's a thing of beauty, except I don't like working with them because I make mistakes all over the place, so they always hate me. But watching a master craftsman is amazing. God gave these guys the spirit to make this according to the pattern. Now, let's get a couple things in mind. I also thought of this when we moved out to California. I wrote a sermon in New Mexico on the way to California. We left Florida in 2017, went to California for 2 years, but we're moving east to west. And you know why I thought of this stuff right here? I don't even, by the way, I don't even know what direction we're in here. But California's that way in my head right now. Is everybody with me? East to west. Is that's west? Okay, I'll do it this way then. You're moving east to west. The entrance of the tabernacle is east to west. You see the symbolism in that? We begin our journey in the morning. Where does it end? Ends at the mercy seat. It ends at the presence of God. But you walk into the tabernacle. You got a 7-foot tall curtain, 150 feet long, 75 feet wide. In the middle is the tabernacle itself. two sections, the holy place and the most holy place. What is the first piece of furniture if you walk in the entrance to the tabernacle? You're still outdoors. What's the first piece of furniture you come to? We're still outdoors. We haven't gone in the tabernacle yet. It's the bronze laver, the one we just read about. It's where they offered the sacrifices. Okay, that's right there. You step around it. You're still headed towards the tabernacle. What's the next piece of furniture? I call it furniture, but you know what they used to worship God. Table of showbread's inside the tabernacle. We are still outside, open air. Bronze laver, it's called. The sea, Solomon's sea is what it's also called, because he made a giant one. I'm not sure exactly the dimensions now, but what was the purpose of it? You want to go in the tabernacle, what's the first thing you got to do? You got to wash up. Who's the only one that can go into the holy place? Priests. Okay, now you step in to the tabernacle. You're a priest. You just washed up. Does that remind you of anything, old Christian? How do you get into the tabernacle? He either believes and is baptized, shall we say. Actually, I should have probably got you started. You're at the bronze laver. Do you know what the burnt offering represents? We're going to read about it after the break. Total commitment to the Lord. They sacrificed the animal totally. You're making a total commitment to the Lord. Romans chapter 12, verse 2. You know, somebody get me started. This is, can't believe I need a running start here. Present yourselves a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to the Lord.
Shall be conformed to this world.
Thank you. That's the running start I was looking for. I appreciate it. But yeah, do not be conformed to this world, be transformed, but also present yourself a living sacrifice. So you're completely dedicated. You wash up. He that believes and is baptized shall be added to the church. Now you can go in the tabernacle. What's on one wall? Table of showbread. 12 loaves. Who can eat it? Priests. Even Jesus knew that, or you know, the Pharisees tried to trap Jesus. David ate the table of showbread. He's not from the tribe of Levi. What's on the other wall? Golden candlesticks. How are they lit? You have to supply oil. How long should it be lit during the course of the day? Don't let it go out. Perpetual light. Fed by oil. You know what you're going to learn tonight? You probably already knew it, but you're going to relearn it tonight. Oil represents the Holy Spirit. Golden lampstand. What's the only thing that lights the world? The Holy Spirit. Only two things the Holy Spirit dwells in. The Christian and the Word of God. The Holy Spirit. What's right in front of you, right before the veil? The altar of incense. Anybody ever read the Book of Revelation, chapter 8? The prayers of the saints ascended with the incense that we just read about. And the angel takes the prayers and throws them back to the earth. Thunderings, lightnings, voices, and an earthquake. What does all that represent? Prayers of the righteous availeth much. Our prayers change things. That's what he's getting at. But that altar of incense, you altered incense along with the prayers, and they drift up before God. Sweet smelling aroma. And then, of course, there's the veil that separates the most holy place, the holy place from the most holy place. What's the only piece of furniture beyond that? Ark of the Covenant. What's the one day of the year that the high priest could go in there? Day of Atonement, Leviticus chapter 16. We'll get there in a few weeks. But it's the only day that he could go into the most holy place where God's Shekinah of glory dwelt above the mercy seat. When Christ was crucified, what was one of the great events that happened at the temple? Veil was cut from top to bottom, signifying our ability to go to heaven. All of that prefigures the church. Now, to the average Jew, it doesn't. You know, the ones that are first reading these instructions. But again, you know, we have the benefit of 20/20 hindsight, and we know what all this is leading to. So as we read these books, we can see how clearly when Paul said this is a schoolmaster to bring us to Christ, all these things are pointing towards the church. Only priests can enter the tabernacle only after they've made a complete sacrifice, clean themselves up, can they go in, enjoy the showbread, which is the Lord's Supper. Who should be eating the Lord's Supper? Christians. Get into an awkward situation every now and then where somebody doesn't know any better eats it, but you know, I mean, as a brother once said, could you be worse than lost? Well, okay. Anyways, we handle the situation delicately, but if people truly understood what it meant to take the Lord's Supper, they would recognize you make a commitment to Christ first. You don't just take it because everybody else around you is taking it and you feel pressure. You make a commitment to Christ, then you can commune with Him. But of course, all of this is represented by the tabernacle. So remember what we read about the oil, and remember what we read about the incense, because that's going to come in handy when we start learning about Nadab and Abihu. So let's read one last passage from Exodus, and then that looks like probably a pretty good place to take a break. Look at chapter 40. Chapter 40, sir. I'm going to read a few verses. Exodus 40, start in verse 1. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, on the first day of the first month, you shall set up the tabernacle of the tent of meeting. You shall put in it the ark of the testimony and partition off the ark with the veil. Drop down to verse 17. And it came to pass in the first month of the second year, on the first day of the month, that the tabernacle was raised up. Hang on let me say something about that. Let me read that again, get me reoriented here. And it came to pass in the first month of the second year, on the first day of the month, that the tabernacle was raised up. How long they been in the wilderness? 1 year. You know how we know it? Because you go back to Exodus chapter 12, which, by the way, Dave, is exactly where I started with the students when Eddie needed some rest. The first thing God did when He instituted the Passover in Exodus chapter 12, changed the Jewish calendar year. First month, first year. Well, here we are at the end of Exodus. Came to pass in the first month, second year. What does that tell us? We're 1 year in. The tabernacle is set up. They received the law at the foot of Mount Mount Sinai. Received the law there. A year later, the tabernacle is up and running. Let's read verses 34 and 38 through 38. Then the cloud covered the tabernacle of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Moses was not able to enter the tabernacle of meeting because the cloud rested above it. The glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. When the cloud was taken up from above the tabernacle, the children of Israel went onward in their journeys. But if the cloud was not taken up, then they did not journey till the day that it was taken up. And we will read all about that in the book of Numbers. For the cloud of the Lord was above the tabernacle by day, and fire was over it by night, in the sight of all the house of Israel throughout their journeys. There's how the book of Exodus ends. Now, one last passage, and then we will take a break. Look at Numbers chapter 1. Numbers 1, verse 1. Now the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tabernacle of meeting on the first day of the second month, in the second year after they come out of the land of Egypt. Book of Numbers takes place. When was that again? First day of the second month in the second year. When was the tabernacle raised up?
First day of the first month.
Okay. Well, we're already up to the book of Numbers. Book of Leviticus fits right there. Moses wrote it somewhere within that 30, 60-day period as the Jews were at Mount Sinai, writing, of course, the guidebook to the Levites. So Moses wrote it right there in that period after the tabernacle had been raised up at the end of the book of Exodus, before, a month later when they took off from Mount Sinai on their first journey, which of course ends in disaster, but we'll get there as well. But that is kind of a setup for the book of Exodus, which of course Moses is the author. We're going to not spend a whole lot of time proving that Moses is the author. We're well aware of the documentary hypothesis theory. I'll tell you a few things about it after the break, but then we are just sticking with the idea that Moses wrote it. But let's go ahead and take a break. Take a break. How long did we break for today? 15 minutes. We'll see you back here at 7:25. All right, let's get back after it. All right, so we know that, or at least we believe that we know Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Old Testament, right? Okay. Not everyone in this world is so inclined to believe such. You guys at least heard of the documentary hypothesis theory?
I'm not sure what it is.
One of the most people are aware of.
Yeah. I'm teaching it to the student, or actually I'm making them. I was thinking it was extra credit from them, but as students, I'd like them to know about it, but I'll tell you just a little bit about it. In the 19th century, German rationalists started looking at the the law of Moses and decided Moses didn't write it. Look at Nehemiah chapter, 8? Get Nehemiah 8 for a second. Let me set up the reading for a minute here. A little bit of Jewish history timeline for you. Does that keep popping? Because I got it too close.
I don't have a windscreen on it.
I'm going to drop it down a little bit. Maybe that'll help. All right, let's get a little timeline going here. When did Moses live and write, basically?
1500.
Yeah. 1405 is basically the year I round things up because I think it's just easier to remember, but let's just call his death in 1400, which means 1440, 1450 is when Moses begins, because his career lasted 40 years. God called him and they wandered in the wilderness 40 years. Book of Deuteronomy, Moses is going to die and be buried just before the Jews move in after 40 years. So last 40 years of his life he spent as Israel's great leader, prophet, and deliverer of the law. In what way is Moses most like Christ? There's a few ways, but the most important way is only Jesus and Moses came with a law, delivered a law. Moses was a prophet, Jesus was a prophet. Moses wasn't a king, but he was certainly the leader. And of course, Christ is King of Kings, but Moses came with a law as well. But Moses basically dies 1400. So the Jews in the book of Joshua take the promised land. When did David live approximately? Give me 1 second. 931, 971. David died right around 1000 BC, 1000 BC. And again, don't take that number home with you. I'm just using round numbers. But it's close enough to 1000 BC for the point I'm trying to make. David dies, Solomon dies. Who's his son? Takes over for him, takes his throne. Rehoboam. Rehoboam makes a foolish decision, splits the kingdom. 1 Kings chapter 12, the kingdom splits. 10 tribes go to the north. Who's their first king? Jeroboam. 19 kings came to the throne in the northern kingdom. How many of them were good? Zilch. 721 BC, the northern kingdom is destroyed. Who destroyed it? Where do you read about it? 2 Kings 17, tell you all about it. 1 Kings 12, the kingdom is split. First thing Jeroboam does is put a calf in Bethel and Dan. And by the way, comes to worship. That's a pretty good story. We'd be looking at it if it was connected to this class, but 1 Kings 12, Jeroboam puts a golden calf in Bethel and Dan, which he devised in his own heart. God called it a sin. Everyone that followed along after him, he called it a sin. That happened in 931 BC. Jeroboam does that. 721, which is 210 years later, God destroys the northern kingdom. He moves them out into the Assyrian land, moves other people in. 10 tribes are gone, never to be reassembled again, despite some people's great notions that it will be. It's gone. But anyways, that happened in 721. And by the way, that's 210 years. God sent him many prophets in that 210 years? Think of any prophets that prophesied to the northern kingdom, which was called Israel and Samaria, because Samaria was a capital city. Sometimes it's called Ephraim too. We're not really sure why it's called Ephraim, other than Ephraim was a very large tribe and Jeroboam was from Ephraim. But particularly if you're reading the book of Hosea, when he's talking about Ephraim, he's talking about the northern kingdom. So there's one hint. Hosea preached to the northern kingdom. So did Amos. So did Elijah. So did Elisha. So did Micaiah. So did the man of God in 1 Kings 13, who confronted King Jeroboam. And those are just the ones I can name off the top of my head. What's my point? Those people in the northern kingdom knew what they were doing was sin. It's amazing to me in the world. You can nail it down 6 ways from Sunday, to use the phrase. And the power of an agenda, some people are just not going to change. I am amazed in that chapter that Jeroboam, anybody remember what happened right after Jeroboam, who's from the tribe of Ephraim, is officiating at the altar in Bethel when the man of God in 1 Kings 13 confronts him. Jeroboam reaches out his arm and says, arrest him. What happens to his arm? It withers. He says to the man of God, entreat the Lord your God. No, so he doesn't call him our God. Entreat the Lord your God to restore my arm. Well, he does. That's 1 Kings 13, but I know what the last 2 chapters or 2 verses in 1 Corinthians 13 tells us. 1 Kings 13 tells us. Jeroboam continued worshiping at that altar. Prophet after prophet after prophet came to him until they were destroyed in 721 BC. The southern kingdom, also known as Judah, Jerusalem, capital city, it lasted until 586 BC. Who destroyed it? Nebuchadnezzar. Did it in his 19th year. You read all about it in the book of Jeremiah particularly. But Jeremiah was the prophet who was on the scene preaching to the southern kingdom as the kingdom was destroyed. But the Jews were taken into Babylonian captivity, but they got to come back and rebuild the temple. Who built the first temple? There's 2 temples in the Old Testament. Who built the first one? Solomon built the first one. In 1993, when I was in school, it could have been 94, the late Ken Franklin, he was a great man, great teacher, but I forget the exact number, but he said he did a detailed analysis of all the material, and as much as he could, he put a price in 1993 dollars on what that temple was valued at. You know what number he came up with? In 1993? Solomon's temple was worth gold at the rate of gold in 1993, the rate of silver, all the workers, give them $10 an hour or whatever. He did that kind of thing. The number he came up with, and he said, guys, I was being modest, 70 to 90 billion dollars. That's some wealth in Solomon's temple. Gets taken away in the book of Jeremiah. Who wrote Lamentations? Anybody know why it's got 22 verses in chapter 1, 2, 4, and 5, 66 in chapter 3? Give you a hint. How many letters are there in the Hebrew alphabet? 22. Yeah. And that's the sum total of my Hebrew knowledge, by the way, guys. Don't ask me any more Hebrew questions. Ask Dad. 22 letters. Jeremiah is weeping from A to Z. Chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. 3 verses follow the next corresponding letter in the Hebrew alphabet. He's weeping from A to Z. How lonely sits the city that was once full of people. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, King Jehoiachin, Ezekiel, they're all in Babylonian captivity. But after 70 years, the Jews come home. They actually come home in 3 waves. But they come home, Ezra led away, or I should say Zerubbabel and Joshua, the son of Jehozadak, led a wave. Ezra led a wave, and then Nehemiah led a wave. They came back home and they rebuilt the temple. In the days of Josiah, which is about 609, that's when he died. About 620, 640, that's it. 640 BC. Jerusalem hadn't been destroyed yet till about 609 BC. One of the great kings in the southern kingdom, Josiah, came to the throne. One of the first things he did was clean up the temple. It had gotten in disrepair. Finds a copy of the law. How was the law missing? One of the things scholars really puzzled at is, what does that mean that Josiah found a copy of the law? Certainly that couldn't be all 5 books of the Old Testament. Most scholars think it was probably just the book of Deuteronomy because of his reaction. When he heard whatever it was he heard from the law, he panicked because he knew trouble was coming if we don't repent. But anyways, what did I bring him up for? Anyways, Jerusalem was destroyed. Jews come back home and rebuild Jerusalem. And now in Nehemiah chapter 8, the temple has been rebuilt. Look at verse, where are we at here? Look at verse 1. Now all the people gathered together as one man in the open square that was in front of the water gate. And they told Ezra the scribe to bring the book of the law of Moses, which the Lord had commanded Israel. So Ezra the priest brought the law before the congregation of men and women and all who could hear with understanding on the first day of the 7th month. Now here's why I had you read that. What year is this basically? It's like 444 BC. When did we just say Moses lived? I just say he died in 1400 BC. That's 1,000 years later. You know what the documentary hypothesis theory says? That reading right there in 444 BC is the first time the law of Moses was ever read. That's how bizarre this theory is. According to that theory, the book of Genesis hasn't been written yet. The book of Exodus hasn't been written. Leviticus or Numbers. Pieces of them have been. They haven't been written. It's a theory that claims that the law of Moses evolved over time. Let me give you some of the highlights. What's that? By different groups. For instance, between the lives of Elijah and Amos, and by the way, before I start this, anybody know who, I'm sure you do, who J.W. McGarvey is? Yeah, his comment, every time I have to teach the book of Acts, that's the first one I turn to is J.W. McGarvey. I read others, but his is excellent. 19th century president of the College of the Bible in Nashville, one of the highest educated brethren the church ever produced. Anyways, he wrote a book called, or a book defending that Moses wrote the book of Deuteronomy. because according to the documentary hypothesis theory, which, oh, by the way, he was living through, the theory was the book of Deuteronomy came first, and it was written after the Jews came home from Babylonian captivity. That's 1,000 years after the life of Moses. And so he wrote a book defending that Moses wrote this book, well acquainted with the documentary hypothesis, because he was living in the days of Julius Wellhausen, who's the most famous for postulating this theory. One of the things you got to remember about this theory, and he points out in his book, is the theory assumes that the miraculous is impossible. And they're writing to destroy the book of, they're claiming to do it with education, but they're trying to destroy the book. One of the first things they do is he imagines that there was a guy who, the documentary hypothesis imagines two guys arose, one in the northern kingdom, one in the southern kingdom, during the days somewhere between Elijah and Amos. And each of them found a document that they can't name. One of them always uses Elohim for God. One of them always uses Jehovah for God. You know what these men have decided? That someone wrote the two different documents. It couldn't be Moses because there's two different names. So they imagine there's two different documents. And over time, the two documents became one. They got letters for them, the JE, and I don't forget, I got it written down right here. I just don't feel like going into all of the details. But anyways, it was the process that evolved over time. So that the book of Deuteronomy, or the law of Moses, according to them, was read for the first time in the days of Nehemiah in 440 BC, basically, 1,000 years after. And J.W. McGarvey, it's a good book, you can look it up online if you want it, has defended the fact that Moses actually wrote the book. Like I said, I'm going to make the students write me a paper about it because I'd like it in detail from them, but I'm not going to do that in our class here, other than to let you know that some people certainly have bought into that theory. But our position is that Moses wrote it, and consider one passage from the New Testament. Look at Matthew 8. Is it Matthew 8? Yeah, Matthew 8. Verse 1, when he had come down, Jesus, of course, had come down from the mountain, great multitudes followed him, and behold, a leper came and worshipped him, saying, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Then Jesus put out his hand and touched him, saying, I am willing, be cleansed. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. Jesus said to him, see that you tell no one, but go your way, show yourself to the priest, and offer the gift that who commanded? As a testimony to them. Notice Jesus is quoting the book of Leviticus and attributing it to Moses. Now we could do that all over the place with Christ attributing all 5 books of the Old Testament, or the books of the law. We could show that the New Testament attributes them to Moses. So we're going to stick with Jesus on this one. Julius Wellhausen said it was evolved over time. Jesus said Moses wrote it. I'm going with Jesus. So we will stick with Moses being the author of this book, and that it was written as we say it was written, which is the first month after they had set up the tabernacle. Moses writes the book of Leviticus because we've got to get the priest's attention, because Leviticus is basically a handbook for the Levitical priesthood. Actually, there's one more passage I want to read before we get into Leviticus. Look at Jeremiah chapter 33. Jeremiah 33. As I said, Jeremiah is living and prophesying in Jerusalem. Just before it is destroyed, he preached from about 640 BC to 580 BC, which means he saw the destruction of the southern kingdom up close and personal. And he wrote the book of Lamentations as an eyewitness. Look what he says in Jeremiah chapter 33, verse 14. Behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, that I will perform that good thing which I have promised to the house of Israel and to the house of Judah. In those days and at that time, I will cause to grow up to David a branch of righteousness. Everybody's Bible got branch highlighted? Capitalized? Why is it capitalized? 5 times in the Old Testament, Christ is referred to as a branch. Isaiah, chapter 11, Zechariah, chapter 3, and I forget where the other one is, but they're twice in the book of Zechariah, and then twice here in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 23, and this one. Branch is an interesting illustration there. But Jesus is likened to a branch that grows up out of a stump in Isaiah chapter 11. In other words, you ever go up to a tree trunk that's been cut off, you think it's dead, and you see a shoot coming out of it? And you realize, oh, wait a minute, that tree's alive. Give it some time. You come back in 40 years, what do you got? Hey, let's hang a swing from it. Yeah, it's a tree again. When Jerusalem was destroyed in the days of Jeremiah and they were taken into captivity, what's Jerusalem look like? It's like a tree stump cut off. Here's a branch. Yeah, David.
I was going to say, Eddie points out online that the other place is Zechariah chapter 6.
Chapter 6. Thank you, Eddie. Appreciate it. Yeah, I forgot that off the top of my head. But anyway, the branch is coming up. What does that mean? Should be easy and obvious to us that although it looks insignificant, glorious things are going to happen. The temple the second temple wasn't anything like the first temple. But Haggai said, wait a minute now. Guess what glorious thing's going to happen in the second temple? You guys are all worried in the book of Haggai. They were all worried because the first temple was glorious. The second temple looked like a one-room schoolhouse. There's nothing compared to the first temple. Haggai says, wait a minute now. The desire of all nations is coming into this temple. It's a reference to Christ. Just when things look like they've been cut off, here comes that second temple, and the Jews, with a shoot, a branch coming out of that dead stump, is alive. And that's the picture and the image that Zechariah and Isaiah and here in Jeremiah they use of Christ. He's a branch of righteousness. He shall execute judgment and righteousness in the earth. In those days, Judah will be saved. Jerusalem will dwell safely. And this is the name by which she will be called, the Lord our righteousness. For thus says the Lord, David shall never lack a man to sit on the throne of the house of Israel. Nor shall the priests, the Levite, like a man to offer burnt offerings before me, to kindle grain offerings and sacrifice continually. And the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah, saying, thus says the Lord, if you can break my covenant with the day and my covenant with the night, so that there will not be a day and night in their season, then my covenant may also be broken with David my servant, so that he shall not have a son to reign on his throne with the Levites and the priests, my ministers. As the host of heaven cannot be numbered, nor the sand of sea be measured, so I will multiply the descendants of David my servant and the Levites who ministered to me. Moreover, the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah, saying, have you not considered what these people have spoken, saying, the 2 families which the Lord has chosen is also cast them off. Thus they have despised my people, and they should no more be a nation before them. Thus says the Lord, if my covenant is not with the day and night, and if I have not appointed the ordinances of heaven and earth, then I will cast away the descendants of Jacob and David my servant, so that I will not take any of his descendants to be rulers over the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. For I will cause their captives to return and will have mercy on them. I actually read a little bit too far. I got away from the point I was making. What does he mean? He'll never have a Levite, lack a Levite to minister to him. What does that mean? But the temple, that second temple was destroyed in AD 70. Yeah, Russ sees where I'm going with this. This is messianic, folks. By the way, you want to know one of the great mistakes that people make when it comes to prophecy? They're always reading prophecy, and they're seeing the second coming of Christ. I can't tell you how many times I'm just sitting at home channel surfing and see a preacher on there, and he's got a board up there, and he starts quoting Old Testament prophets, and the first thing he does is apply them to the second coming of Christ. You know, the Old Testament prophets had almost nothing to say about the second coming of Christ. What were they all about? That was on their mind. The branch of righteousness. Jeremiah sees an image, a vision of the glorious days of the rise of the Messiah and the rise of the Levites, and that the Levites will continuously serve me. Well, if Jerusalem was destroyed in AD 70, then that can't literally be true. But Russ, you probably already know, why do I have 1 Peter 2, 5 and 9 written down next to this? Because 1 Peter calls us a royal priesthood, a holy priesthood. One of the most boring books in most people's minds in the Old Testament, or New for that matter, is the Book of Leviticus, because it reads like law. But of course, to the Jew who's reading it for the first time, and for the Levite and the priest who are actually being written to in the first generation, it's just an instruction manual on how to do the proper sacrifices of God. But to us, again, because we know the rest of the story, we get to look back at the book of Leviticus, and what do we notice? He's right into the priesthood. Well, who's the priesthood now? Well, then do you think if we read the book of Leviticus as the royal and holy priesthood that we might be able to learn anything and we can apply to ourselves? All kinds of things in the book of Leviticus that are actually pointing to the age of the church. Again, to the Jew, he wouldn't have understood that. But you and I, we do understand it. So I like Jeremiah chapter 33 because it connects us with the Levitical priesthood. You know, we tend to look at it in the opposite. The Levitical priesthood gives way to the church, who is the priesthood, the holy and royal priesthood. But I like to look at it in the reverse order too. It's pretty neat to know that I've been connected with the... One of the things I love about the Old Testament is the language that's used to describe us. For instance, Isaiah 53. Jesus is going to divide a portion with the strong and the great. What does that mean? Life. Eternal life. He's going to divide it with us. What did he call us? What did he call me? I'm great. I'm strong. I love the language of the Old Testament. You get to Micah chapter 4. What's the church likened to? The lame and the outcast. I will build a strong nation with them. I don't know anybody lamer than me. And that passage gives me comfort. My point is that I love the language of the Old Testament and how it speaks to us. We have a privilege to join the royal priesthood that we are going to learn about in the book of Leviticus. But let's notice a few sacrifices before we get... Oh, there it is. No wonder I lost it. Yeah, there it is. The first offering in the book of Leviticus, of course, is the burnt offering. There's 5 offerings from chapters 1 through 7 in the book of Leviticus. All 5 of them point to Christ in some way, and let that sink in for a minute. All 5 of these sacrifices in some way point us towards Christ. In some way, his perfections took 5 sacrifices to express in this book. But let us notice that the burnt offering is actually much older than the book of Leviticus. Look at Genesis chapter 8, excuse me. Noah has just gotten off of the ark, he and his 3 sons. Genesis 8. Verse 20. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord and took of every clean animal and of every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And the Lord smelled a soothing aroma. Hang on to that phrase too. The Lord smelled a soothing aroma. And then the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground for man's sake, although the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth, nor will I again destroy every living thing as I have done. Now, why are we reading this? What's the first thing Noah does when he gets off of the ark? Builds an altar, but what kind of sacrifice? Exactly. Burnt offering, the complete offering, the whole offering. I already knew about that. It's not a new idea when you get to the book of Leviticus. In the patriarchal period, started with Noah. The same thing is true when you get to Genesis 22 and Abraham is told to offer up Isaac. He's going to offer him up as a burnt offering. Then God, of course, provides the goat, which, if we get time, we'll have something to say about that. Or, excuse me, not a goat, but a ram, which is connected with the trespass offering. So you have the burnt offering in Genesis 8. You have it in 22. Exodus 18. I won't make a turn there, but Exodus 18, verse 12. Moses. And by the way, are you still in Genesis? I forgot, as long as I had you turn there. Verse 21, I will never, the Lord smelled a soothing aroma, and then the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground for man's sake, although the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. You know why I got this passage highlighted? Because I don't think we're born totally depraved. And if somebody was challenging me, hey, Mike, aren't we born in sin? By the way, I've had plenty, not plenty, but I've had occasions of friends that came visited me and they just assumed we believed babies were born in sin because everywhere else they've been believed babies were born in sin, so why wouldn't you believe it? Well, we don't believe it. We believe babies are born innocent, that we wander away, we are led away by our own desires, and when we are accountable, we will have to do something about our sins. But we didn't start out sinful, and I'm not trying to have a Bible study tonight about born in sin or total depravity. The only thing I'm pointing out is, why do you think this passage gets my attention?
It's indicating that it is from their youth, not from their birth.
Thank you. If we were born evil, it would say from man's, let me quote it again, his heart is evil from birth. It doesn't say from birth, it says from his youth. That's just one of the passages I would use. Ezekiel 18:20 is still my favorite. But anyways, thought I would point that out. Jethro in Exodus chapter 18, verse 12 offered, who's Jethro in the book of Exodus? Moses' father-in-law, priest of Midian. By the way, where did Midian come from? Does anybody know? I love pointing these out when I know them, because it shows you how far man wanders away from God. Jethro is a priest from Midian. Who bore Midian? Genesis 25:2. When Abraham married Keturah, he had 6 kids. He got real fruitful and multiplied in his old age. One of those kids was Midian. How does Midian not know God? When we get to Numbers 22:3 and 4, Balaam uses the Midianite women to seduce Israel. How did their religion become ritual prostitution? When they started out bouncing on Abraham's knee. That's how important it is to teach your children true religion. Because if you don't, this is what happens over time. All right, but that was Jethro who offered a burnt offering.
Jethro knows about God.
Excuse me?
Jethro is.
Well, Midian hadn't wandered that far in the days of Exodus. Well, actually they had, because by the time of Numbers, they're already doing that sort of thing. But I get your point there. One last passage. Look at Job chapter 1. Of course, Job living somewhere between Abraham and Moses. Not sure exactly, but when you do some of the, you just did a class on that. You could probably tell us all about it, couldn't you?
Well, nobody knows, but he's certainly back there.
Yeah, he's way back there. Some of the names that you can see connected kind of give us a pretty good window, but here's what I wanted us to notice.
Probably more contemporary than Abraham.
That's what I'm thinking too, yeah. Chapter 1, drop down to verse 5. So it was when the days of feasting had run their course that Job would send and sanctify them. He would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings, according to the number of them all, that's his children. For Job said, it may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Thus Job did regularly. Now, the reason I wanted to read that passage is notice that while it's a burnt offering, Job seems to connect it with sin. So somehow in the patriarchal era, before the law of Moses, the burnt offering, I think, represented more than what it does in the law of Moses. I think Moses kind of, in Leviticus, makes it more precise, if you will. Whereas in the patriarchal period, the burnt offering seems to stand for also forgiveness of sin, if you will. Anyways.
Because you have these offerings that sort of God evolves to a more finite specifics.
And also, I think it's kind of the process of growing up. I haven't had children. I haven't been blessed to have children. Yeah, I mean, I just didn't have children, but anybody that's had children knows that. But anybody that's had children knows there are times in a child's young life that you think to yourself, why bother explaining it to them? They're not going to get it yet. They'll figure it out. Well, God kind of did that with us. The maturing process took some time. A couple of key phrases that jump out at me in the New Testament. Remember when Jesus said, Moses did indeed allow you to divorce, but it's because of the hardness of your heart. And the other phrase that jumps out at me is, what did Paul say about the times of ignorance God winked at? But he now commands all men everywhere to, the Old Testament. I'll tell you another good image. I forget the passage in Peter. Maybe Eddie can help me out with this one. I forget where it is in Peter, but Peter, I think it's 2 Peter 1, I want to say. Talks about the Old Testament being prophecy and shining in a dark place. And the morning star rises in our soul, I think it is. I forget the exact wording there. Pretty sure it's 2 Peter 1. I'm almost positive it is. Let me look it up real quick. If it's not right here, I'll just move on. Or is it 1 Peter 1? Yeah, it's 1 Peter 1. That's what's confusing me. 1 Peter 1, verse 10. Of this salvation the prophets have inquired, searched diligently, who prophesied of the grace that would come to you, searching what manner of time the Spirit of Christ who was in them was indicated when he testified beforehand the sufferings of Christ and the glories that would follow. Is this the passage?
1 Peter 1:19, that is it.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Thank you. I would have gotten there eventually, but no, that's not it. Well, I'm not going to look it up. I'm wasting too much time already, but you know what passage I'm talking about. Anyways, the reason I brought it up is because to me, the patriarchal period is like being outside at night on a new moon.
There's a 2 Peter 1.
I was in 1 Peter 1:19. Anybody there, go ahead and read it. I'm not going to run back there. Yeah, maybe I will. Well, let me.
My brother, if any of you strays from the truth and one turns back, let him know that he turns sin from his way. It's not this.
No, don't worry about it. We're running out of time. I'm not going to worry about it. But the illustration is this. The patriarchal period to me is like being outside at night, a starlit night, but it's a new moon. Do you have any kind? Yeah, go ahead.
And we have the word of prophet
That's the one.
made more sure, whereunto ye do well that ye take heed as unto a lamp shining in a dark place until the day dawn and the day star arise in your hearts.
Bingo. What
Chapter verse?
1 Peter 1:19.
Okay.
Second Peter.
Thank you. I thought it was 2 Peter 1, but I didn't go down to verse 19. Point being, he's likening the Old Testament to a light shining in a dark place. I was thinking of it just a little bit different, but patriarchal period, you're outside new moon, you can see all the stars, but can you do anything? Not much. You ever go outside on a clear night when there's a full moon? I remember when we were kids, we liked to play catch. See how good you were. See that ball coming in the night? Point being, you can do some things at night, can't you? Even on a night on a full moon, you can have a game of catch if you're careful. But does the light on a night of a full moon compare with high noon? It's not even close. That's how God revealed himself. Patriarchal period, there was little light. Mosaic periods like moonlight. And of course, Christ is like sunlight, the morning glory rising in your hearts. And so here we get more specific with these offerings. In these offerings, you had 5 animals to choose from. As we're talking about the burnt offering, I should say. Yeah, okay. By the way, offering means to ascend upwards. There are 5 animals you could choose from: the bull, the sheep, the goat, the turtle dove, and the pigeon. And I like, forget the name of the author. I was reading a few sources, and it wasn't Smith, but he made the statement. Where is it? I got it written here. Oh, yeah, he made this statement. Why do you suppose all these animals are domesticated? Because according to him, and I thought it was a good thought, Matthew 11:19, take my yoke upon me, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Notice he's using the domesticated animals that help with man's farming and help in so many ways to begin with. But anyways, hang on a second. Yeah, okay. There we go. All right. 5 animals you can choose from with these: the bull, the sheep, the goat, turtle dove, and the pigeon. Offering, of course, means to be brought near. Oh, okay, no wonder I'm getting confused. I got it now. Let's go to the book of Leviticus and start reading. The first offering is the burnt offering. Thank you. Hang on, I'm not in Leviticus yet. All right, so the burnt offering occupies chapter 1. Let's take a look at it. Now the Lord called to Moses and spoke to him from the tabernacle of meeting. By the way, notice he's not speaking to him from the mountain, speaking to him from the tabernacle of meeting, which means his voice is coming from the mercy seat. Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when any one of you brings an offering to the Lord, you shall bring your offering of the livestock, of the herd, of the flock, and his offering. If his offering is a burnt sacrifice of the herd, let him offer a male without blemish, and he shall offer it of his own free will at the door of the tabernacle of meeting before the Lord. He shall put his hand on the head of the burnt offering, and it will be accepted on his behalf to make atonement for him. He shall kill the bull before the Lord, and the priests, Aaron's son, shall bring the blood and sprinkle the blood all around on the altar that is by the door of the tabernacle of meeting. And he shall take skin, and he shall skin the burnt offering, cut it into its pieces. And by the way, that's one of the reasons I read Abraham's account in Genesis 15 when the Lord passed through the pieces. Because how they're dividing these animals up, we're not exactly sure, or what is the purpose. And I believe that that is the purpose, because it's that solemn vow. So they're cutting the burnt offering into pieces. The sons of Aaron, the priest, shall put fire on the altar and lay the wood in order on the altar. Then the priest, Aaron's son, shall lay the parts, the head and the fat in order on the wood that is on the fire upon the altar. But he shall wash its entrails and its legs with water, and the priest shall burn all on the altar as a burnt sacrifice, an offering made by fire, a sweet aroma to the Lord. There's that phrase. Keep that in mind. And if his offering is of the flocks of the sheep or of the goats, as a burnt sacrifice, he shall bring a male without blemish. He shall kill it on the north side of the altar before the Lord. And the priest, Aaron's son, shall sprinkle its blood all around on the altar. He shall cut it in its pieces with its head, its fat. The priest shall lay them in order on the wood that is on the fire upon the altar. And he shall wash the entrails and the legs with water, and the priest shall bring it all and burn it on the altar. It is a burnt sacrifice, an offering made by fire, a sweet aroma, there's that phrase again, to the Lord. And if the burnt sacrifice of his offering to the Lord is of birds, then he shall bring the offering of turtle doves or pigeons. The priest shall bring it to the altar, wring off its head, burn it on the altar. Its blood shall be drained out at the side of the altar, and he shall remove its crop with its feathers and cast it beside the altar, and the east side in the place for ashes. And he shall split it at its wings, but shall not divide it completely. And the priest shall burn it on the altar, on the wood that is on the fire. It's a burnt sacrifice, an offering made by fire, a sweet aroma to the Lord. Now, the first thing I want us to notice is there are three beings coming together here: the offerer, priest, and God. What's the priest doing? He's serving as the mediator here. And so we want to look at these offerings from three different angles, if you will. Yes, sir.
The person who brought the offering, that person actually did the killing, or the priest did the killing?
What do you think?
Person,
You want to take a guess? Did everybody hear the question? Who killed the animal?
the person who brought it.
Yep. You know why, don't you?
So that's a personal thing.
You did it. What's the purpose of the sacrifice? Substitutionary death. He laid his hands on it. That's him. That's confession right there. He's acknowledging his sins. I don't think they say anything out loud, but by putting his hands on the animal, he's acknowledging his sins. First few times I read it, I just kind of assumed the priest was executing them because he's the priest. That's what they do. No, it's the sinner, the offerer, that's actually cutting the throat of the animal. Yes.
My question is, we talk about maybe people doing their own,
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
doing that sacrifice. I mean, is every male required to bring a sacrifice for his family here, or?
No, this is individual and this is voluntary.
So, I guess I'm trying to look at the time. Is this over the course of a day, or? This is a long, drawn out process. This is a lot of animals. This is a large herd of animals I'm seeing here. These, everybody, people who are traveling with them and who are in this convoy that's traveling. This could be thousands of animals.
The fire on the altar and I mentioned the oil and the golden lampstand burned perpetually. So the fire on the altar, it never went out. It was all day long, every day. Now, remember at this time, all of Israel is 3 million right around next to the tabernacle. But yeah, these are voluntary offerings. So, when you got 3, and by the way, how did we get 3 million? I keep throwing that number up. Book of Numbers gives us 2 census. One is 603 and change. I think that's at the beginning. And then at the end, 601 and change. That's just the fighting men, 20 years and up. Well, we can do the math to a reasonable degree. Married, got a few children. How many does that add up to? At the end of the day, that adds up to 2.5 to 3 million. I just rounded up to make it simple, but any scholar that you're reading says Israel was somewhere between 2 million and 3 million in the wilderness. So yes, it's a lot of people, and yes, and by the way, on the day of Passover, you wouldn't believe the lines they had. Buckets going one way from the slain animal down to, the next guy who's up, who's slaying his animal, and empty buckets. There's just a constant flow the whole day on the Passover. But yes, it's a never-ending process, if that's your question.
On the birds, the priest rings the neck.
What's that?
Priest rings the neck.
Which I don't really have a real good explanation for that, but yes, the priest does it, not the offerer. But the offerer does do the killing, and the two things that we're supposed to learn from that's number one, it's my sins, and number two, substitution. You're dying instead of me. You slit that neck. And by the way, here's another charge people make against God. The Old Testament God is bloodthirsty. Why is he bloodthirsty? I hate that term, but I'll stick with the term. What was Israel supposed to learn? I'll work off of your question. I want you to walk up to an animal. And by the way, why is he usually 1 year old, but without blemish? Young and without blemish. Why is that? Only accept things that are perfect. You get to the book of Malachi, chapter 1, they were offering the lame and the blind as a sacrifice. But also, remember, everything points towards Christ. How old was Christ when he was crucified? About 33, because we know his ministry started when he was about 30. It lasted 3 years because we see 3 Passovers in his ministry. So he's about 33 years old. Anybody ready to check out when they were 33? I remember when I was 12, I was laying on the grass in Michigan looking at the star, or no, it was the daytime. I was looking at the clouds, and I was 12, and I was born in 1960. And I thought to myself, year 2000, I'm going to be 40. Might as well be dead. I remember when 2000 got here, I don't feel dead. Well, it's 20 years later, and I still don't feel dead. 33 years old, cut off in the middle of life, cut off in his prime. By the way, what do you do with bulls? They work your field. They produce more cows and bulls. There's a lot of money in it. It'd be a lot easier if I could give you the old one that we're not getting any use out of anymore. I want the best. And it represents Christ. Christ was sacrificed in the prime of his life. And so the animal had to be without. And by the way, why are they cutting it open? And also, because you have to examine the purity inside as well. Pure inside and out. Christ was, what's that?
And they washed the entrails of the legs.
Yeah. And they washed them to make sure they were clean and they were pure. Where are we at here? Of course, the priest acted as the mediator. They flayed the animals to examine their perfection. Notice I said a sweet-smelling aroma from the Lord. Can somebody look up Ephesians chapter 5, verse 2 for a minute? Ephesians 5:2.
And walk in love, as Christ also loved us and given himself for us, an offering and a sacrifice to God. Sweet-smelling aroma.
Sweet-smelling aroma, same thing. Notice of these 5 offerings in Leviticus, only the first 3 are called a sweet-smelling aroma. Why do you suppose the last 2, we don't see that phrase? The answer is pretty obvious when you know what the last 2 are. Guess what the last 2 offerings are? Sin and the trespass. There's nothing sweet savor about that. Must be dealt with, but there's nothing sweet and savory. The burnt offering, a complete dedication to the Lord, that's a different subject. 2 Corinthians chapter 2, what verse is it? 15, 16 says the same thing. For we are to God the fragrance of Christ among those who are being saved. So anyways, that is sweet-smelling aroma. And the burnt offering, of course, completely represents our consecration to the Lord. Romans chapter 12 and verse 2. So all of these things the burnt offering pointed towards. Chapter 2 is the grain offering. What we got left here? All right. Let's look at chapter 2, the grain offering. By the way, if you read from the King James, it says meat offering. Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate. Meat used to be a more generic term, but it's actually grain is what we're talking about. This is the only offering that doesn't include blood. And oh, by the way, what's unique about the grain offering? It was never offered alone. It was always offered in conjunction with another offering. Anyways, chapter 2. When anyone offers a grain offering to the Lord, his offering shall be of fine flour. He shall pour oil on it, and put frankincense on it. And since we're running out of time, let's just kind of deal with some of these issues as we find them. What do you think the fine flour speaks of? Keep crushing it, and gets purer and purer. The life of Christ and its purity was seen under the pressure that he lived in. So his character is spoken of. Keep reading. What is frankincense?
That's it. Substance of perfume or
It was used in the altar of incense. It was mixed in with some other things, but it's a white substance.
It was one of the gifts Jesus was given at his birth.
One of the gifts Jesus was given at his birth. What'd you say?
tree.
Yeah, and it was white. Purity. Notice what we're putting on this, the grain offering. We're putting frankincense, which represents purity, and oil. What did I tell you the oil represents? It's the Holy Spirit. Oil represents the Holy Spirit. What are the only 3 offices in the Old Testament that it required you to be anointed with oil?
Priest, king.
Prophet, priest, and king. Jesus was all 3. But oil, of course, is highly symbolic of, you got to have oil. The Book of Zechariah uses that imagery, but you got to have oil to keep the lamps lit. The light of the earth depends on the supply of oil. And of course, symbolically, they kept the lamps lit all the time. What does that mean? As Christians, do we take Monday off because it's the day after Sunday? Woo! Day off. Doesn't work that way, does it? It's supposed to be a continual thing. The Holy Spirit's with you always. And so oil, once again, here we have it on the grain offering, also with incense. Verse 2, he shall bring it to Aaron's sons, the priests, one of whom shall take from his handful of fine flour, oil with the frankincense, and the priest shall burn it as a memorial on the altar, an offering made by fire, a sweet aroma to the Lord. Whose portion is represented on the fire? It's God's. The priest would live off of these sacrifices, but the portion that's put on the altar belongs to God. See how we're in fellowship with God? We get a portion of it, the priest gets a portion of it, and God gets a portion of it, depending on what offering we're talking about here. But anyways, look at verse 3. The rest of the grain offering shall be Aaron's and his sons. It is the most holy offering of the offerings to the Lord made by fire. If you bring a grain offering of grain offering baked in the oven, it shall be unleavened cakes of fine flour mixed with oil, or unleavened wafers anointed with oil. And here's that oil again. What is the purpose of unleavened cakes? Purity. Little leaven leavens the whole lump. Now you will see that we're about to have a sacrifice where there could be leaven, would be leaven. And we'll mention that when we get there. But yes, unleavened represents purity. Verse 5, but if your offering is a grain offering baked in a pan, notice there are several ways you could bring it. You could just bring dough. You could bring cakes. You could bring unleavened mixed in a pan. You could also, verse 7, bring unleavened mixed in a covered pan. And of course, if it's in the oven, they're baked in the oven. If it's in a pan, It's fried, got a lid on it. The heat is extra intense. What do you suppose that represents? Did Christ have it easy while he was on this earth? Pressure, heat, intensity. But anyways, you put the frankincense and you put the oil on it. Verse 9 again, the offering made by fire is a sweet aroma to the Lord. Verse 10, and what is left of the grain offering shall be Aaron's and his sons. It is the most holy offering of the Lord, of the offerings to the Lord made by fire. No grain offering which you bring to the Lord shall be made with leaven, for you shall burn no leaven nor any honey in any offering to the Lord made by fire. Anybody want to tell me why no honey? It can have a leavening effect, but also some scholars think, and it might be appropriate, I'm not sure, but honey is, a sweet food, festive food, food that makes you smile, makes you feel good, comfort food. Peanut butter and honey, I'll feel better. You're supposed to be feeling better when it comes to these sacrifices? Is that a good reflection of Christ? Christ did not win people over by his charismatic personality. He won people over by the exhibition of the power of the Holy Spirit and his righteous, holy walk, not charisma. But anyways, the point being that honey probably represents an inappropriate kind of food for a sacrifice. I'm not positive if that's true, but I'm inclined with Russ there that it has a leavening possibility. But why honey is picked out, I'm not sure, but guess what? Don't use it. Verse 12. For the offering of the first fruits you shall offer them on the altar, but they shall not be burned on the altar for a sweet aroma. And every offering of your grain offering you shall season with salt. Imagine you can tell me why you should season it with salt. And what else? I was going to say preserve. Thank you. I was having trouble with the words. Preserver. You're the light of the world, the salt of the earth. Speech should be with grace, but also seasoned with salt. It's a preservative. Once again, symbolizing Christ. You shall not allow the salt of the covenant of your God to be lacking from your grain offering. With all your offerings you shall offer salt. If you offer a grain offering of your first fruits to the Lord, you shall offer it for the grain offering of your first fruits, green heads, of grain roasted on the fire, grain beaten from full heads. And you shall put oil on it and lay frankincense on it. It is a grain offering. Then the priest shall burn the memorial portion. It is part of the beaten grain and part of the oil with the frankincense and the offering made by fire to the Lord. So you are in communion with the Lord through these offerings, but the priest is serving as a mediator. Paul said, if I sow you spiritual things, I ought to be able to partake in your carnal things. Luke said, labor is worthy of his wages. The priest would live off of these sacrifices. And so you're in communion. Yes, ma'am.
In the New Testament, it's pointed out that if salt loses its savor, it's good for nothing but to be trampled underfoot.
Yeah, exactly. And so I had to have salt on it for that very reason, for that preservative factor. I was hoping to go a little bit further, but there's the burnt and the grain offering. Both of them have aspects of Christ in them, completely sacrificing ourselves to the Lord. With the grain offering, of course, we are recognizing where all of our provisions come from, but they are apt reflections of the Lord. Next week, we'll pick it up with the peace offering of chapter 3. We'll get into the sin and the trespass offering. Brother, it's good to have you out tonight, 8:30. I guess we will stop right there. No sense picking it up. A little bit behind, but we'll catch up next week. I don't plan on reading every verse by verse. We got too much to cover, but we'll sum up wherever we think is appropriate. But still feeling it out a little bit. Online, brethren, thank you for tuning in. Oh, by the way, I never mentioned anything. Got to bring a copy of my syllabus tonight for those of you who are taking this class for a grade. 3 tests, 33% of your grade each test. after Leviticus, after Numbers. Final will be Deuteronomy. Extra credit, if you don't, you get a grade and you don't like it, want to improve it, let's talk. I didn't actually make an extra credit plan unless somebody required some extra credit. So if extra credit's something you think you want, let's talk to me and we'll see what we can do. But basically 3 tests, Leviticus, and after the end of each month, like the 1st of April, or excuse me, March, Leviticus, 1st of April and the 1st of May. Yes.